The neon lights of Incheon International Airport blurred into a kaleidoscope of electric blues and pinks as we stepped into the humid Seoul air. My friends, Shalom, Janice, and Suri, were already vibrating with an energy I couldn't quite match. We had spent 4 years in college dreaming of this, the ultimate skincare pilgrimage to the heart of K-beauty. "Can you believe we're actually here?" Janice squealed, clutching her designer suitcase. "I can believe we're about to spend 3 months' salary on snail mucin and sheet masks," Shalom joked, nudging me. I laughed, but as we walked toward the hotel shuttle, I felt a strange prickle at the base of my neck. I was hard to miss here. At nearly 6 feet tall, with skin the color of deep mahogany and a crown of soft curls inherited from my mother, I felt like a skyscraper among the bustling crowds. My father's sharp, European features gave my face an angularity that people often stared at, but this felt different. It wasn't curiosity, it was a weight. "Angela, get in," Suri called from the bus door. I glanced back at the terminal one last time. A black sedan with tinted windows sat idling by the curb. I couldn't see the driver, but I felt his eyes. I shook it off, blaming the long flight from California. I was here to relax, not to be paranoid. The second night was meant for dancing. We headed to a club in Gangnam, an underground palace of bass and expensive champagne. Suri, looking like a literal angel with her blonde hair and silk dress, was already drawing a crowd of admirers. "Everyone is staring," I whispered to Shalom as we moved toward the bar. Shalom laughed, tossing her hair back. "Of course they are, Angela, look at you, you're a goddess in a room full of mortals. Stop being so self-conscious and drink." But it wasn't the crowd I was worried about. It was the VIP balcony. High above the dance floor, shrouded in shadow, sat a man. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could see the glow of a cigarette and the silhouette of broad shoulders. The next day in Myeongdong was worse. Amidst the chaos of street food and beauty stalls, I turned around and saw them, 3 men in sharp black suits, moving through the crowd with a synchronization that didn't fit the casual atmosphere. "They're following us," I said, my voice trembling. Janice didn't even look up from a display of serums. "Maybe they're bodyguards for a K-pop idol. Ang, you're watching too many K-dramas, relax." I wanted to believe her, I really did. We returned to the club the following night, but the atmosphere felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. That's when I saw him clearly. He was sitting at a central table, flanked by the men from the market. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with a face carved from granite and eyes that held a terrifying, predatory stillness. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing intricate tattoos that snaked down his muscular forearms, dark, traditional ink that whispered of violence and power. He didn't blink, he just watched me. A waitress approached our table, carrying a bottle of Ace of Spades that cost more than my tuition. "For Angela," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "from the boss." I froze, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Are you sure? Maybe it's for Suri." I gestured to my beautiful friend, hopping for a mistake. The waitress didn't look at Suri, she looked only at me. "He does not make mistakes." I looked toward his table, but he was gone. Panic flared in my chest. "I need to go to the restroom," I told the girls, my voice cracking. I stumbled away, needing cold water on my face. As I pushed open the heavy restroom door to leave, a woman in a black tactical shirt stood there like a sentinel. She didn't say a word, she just stepped forward. The world went black before I could even scream. Consciousness returned in waves of velvet and silk. My head throbbed with a dull, chemical ache. As my eyes fluttered open, I didn't see the grime of a basement or the bars of a cell. Instead, I saw a ceiling painted with delicate gold leaf. I was lying on a bed large enough for 5 people, draped in linens that felt like liquid cream. The room was a masterpiece of marble and glass, overlooking the sprawling, glowing veins of Seoul's midnight traffic. It was a room meant for a princess, or a prisoner who was being highly valued. "You are awake." The voice was deep, like the low hum of a cello, and it came from the shadows near the window. I bolted upright, clutching the duvet to my chest. He was sitting in a leather armchair, one leg crossed over the other. Chul-Moo. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. The tattoos on his hands looked like armor, and his dark eyes held a terrifying level of focus. He wasn't looking at me with lust. He was looking at me with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had finally collected a rare prize. "Where am I?" I gasped, my voice coming out as a dry whisper. "Where are my friends?" "Your friends are safe at their hotel," he said, his English perfect but accented with a heavy, dangerous grit. "They think you met a man and went home with him. They think you are having the night of your life. I tried to swing my legs off the bed, but my knees felt like jelly. I want to leave. Let me go or I'll call the police. Chul-Moo stood up. He was even taller than he looked in the club, a wall of muscle tailored into a charcoal suit. He walked toward the bed, and instinctively I scrambled backward until my back hit the headboard. He didn't stop until he was standing right over me. The police in this city do not cross my threshold, Angela, he said, leaning down. The scent of expensive sandalwood and tobacco drifted off him. My name is Park Chul-Moo. In this country I am the law, I am the shadow, and right now I am the only thing that matters in your world. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. His skin was warm, a startling contrast to his cold expression. I shivered, but I couldn't look away. Why me? I whispered. There are thousands of girls in Seoul, Surrey. She's the one everyone looks at. Chul-Moo's eyes darkened, his hand moving to the nape of my neck, his grip firm but not painful. The world is full of glass beads, Angela. You are a black diamond. Rare, untamed. I saw you and I decided that I would not let you leave this peninsula. The next morning, the woman in black, the one from the restroom, entered the room with a tray of food and a wardrobe of clothes that cost more than my car back in California. Her name was Min-hee, and she was as silent as a ghost. I won't eat, I told her, glaring at the steamed abalone and fresh fruit. She didn't respond, she simply placed a smartphone on the tray. I grabbed it immediately, hopping to call Shalom, but my heart sank. There was no SIM card, no internet. The only contact saved in the phone was labeled Master. A text message sat on the screen. Eat, we are going out this evening, if you behave. I will let you hear your friends' voices. It was a brilliant, cruel play. He knew my weakness was my loyalty. I forced myself to swallow the food, tasting nothing but my own fear and an emerging, confusing spark of curiosity. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I was high up, at least 50 stories. Below, Seoul moved on, oblivious to the fact that I was being kept in a sky-high fortress by a man who treated people like chess pieces. I looked at the black dress laid out on the chair for me. It was backless, designed to show off every curve of my tall frame. Chul-Moo wasn't just keeping me, he was dressing me for a role I hadn't auditioned for. The dress was a midnight blue liquid silk that clung to my body as if custom-made. It felt scandalous, and that was exactly the point. Min-hee had styled my hair into an elegant updo, revealing the curve of my neck, and applied makeup that subtly highlighted my features. I was transformed, yet I felt utterly exposed. Chul-Moo was waiting for me in the living room, a vast space with minimalist design and breathtaking city views. He wore a dark suit, impeccably tailored, and his presence filled the room. His eyes swept over me, a slow, possessive gaze that made my skin prickle. Beautiful, he murmured, a hint of something unreadable in his tone. He didn't offer his arm. He simply turned and led the way to a private elevator that whisked us down to the garage. A sleek black Rolls-Royce waited, flanked by 2 more black sedans. Min-hee was already in the front passenger seat. As we drove, the city lights blurred into streaks. We weren't going to a public club or restaurant. The car turned off the main thoroughfare and wound its way through narrow, unlit streets, finally pulling up to a large, traditional Korean estate hidden behind high walls. Security guards, identical to the men who had followed us in Myeongdong, stood sentinel at the ornate gates. This was his kingdom, unseen by tourists, untouched by the law. Inside, the estate was a blend of ancient beauty and stark modernity. Wood paneling and intricate carvings met tempered glass and minimalist lighting. A gathering was underway, men in suits, women in elegant dresses, all deferential, all quiet in Chul-Moo's presence. They were clearly important people, but they orbited him like planets around a sun. He introduced me simply as Angela, offering no further explanation. Their eyes, though curious, were carefully neutral. I felt like a trophy, a beautiful, exotic possession on display. Chul-Moo moved through the room with an effortless authority, a quiet word here, a subtle gesture there, and things happened. I watched him orchestrate conversations, settle disputes with a glance, and command loyalty with an almost chilling grace. He wasn't just a boss, he was a puppet master. At one point, I overheard a heated conversation in Korean between 2 men. Chul-Moo approached, and their voices immediately dropped. He spoke to them, his tone low and sharp, and both men bowed deeply, their faces pale. He had settled something serious, swiftly and decisively. He then turned to me, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Are you entertained, Jagi?" he asked, using a Korean endearment that made my stomach clench. I merely nodded, sipping the sparkling water I had insisted on. The air was thick with power, money, and the unspoken threat of violence. Later that evening, after the guests had dispersed, Chul-Moo led me to a private garden within the estate. Lanterns cast soft glows on meticulously manicured trees and a tranquil koi pond. The quiet was a stark contrast to the earlier intensity. "You understand now," he said, stopping by the pond. He didn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the swimming fish. "This is my world and you are in it." "I don't understand why I am in it," I countered, my voice braver than I felt. "I'm not like these people, I'm not Korean, I'm just a tourist." He finally turned to face me. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, the dark intensity of his eyes. "You are more than a tourist, Angela, you are an addiction." He stepped closer, closing the small distance between us. The air hummed with unspoken things. He lifted a hand, and for a moment I flinched, expecting a harsh touch. Instead, his fingers gently brushed a loose strand of hair from my face. It was an unexpected tenderness, a disarming gesture that shattered my carefully constructed defenses. "Do not pretend you do not feel it," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "This pull, this dark thing between us." My breath hitched. In that moment, surrounded by his power, his world, I felt a tremor of something new, something dangerously exciting, rising to meet his gaze. The drive back to the penthouse was silent, but the air in the car was charged. Every time Chul-Moo shifted his weight, I felt it in my bones. When we arrived, he didn't send me to my room. He led me to his study, a room that smelled of old books, expensive scotch, and him. He walked to a cabinet and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid. "You want to hear them," he stated, not asking. He handed me the smartphone from the tray. It was already ringing. My heart leapt. "Angela, oh my God, girl, where are you?" Shalom's voice was frantic, coming through the speaker. "We called the police, but they said you were seen leaving with a handsome boyfriend. Why didn't you tell us you met someone?" I looked at Chul-Moo. He was leaning against his desk, watching me with a cold, triumphant smirk. He mouthed the words, "Be careful." I'm sorry, Shalom," I lied, my voice trembling. It was impulsive. I'm staying at his place for a bit, I'm safe, I promise." "Is he the guy from the club with the tattoos?" Shalom asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. He looked like trouble, hot trouble, but still. "I have to go," I whispered, hanging up before I could break. Chul-Moo took the phone from my hand. "You did well," he murmured. He reached out, his thumb pressing firmly against my bottom lip. "You are learning that in my world the truth is whatever I say it is." The following week was a psychological chess match. Chul-Moo didn't keep me locked in the bedroom. He allowed me the run of the penthouse, but Min-hee was always 3 steps behind me. He began to join me for every meal. He would watch me eat, his eyes never leaving my face. He bought me more clothes, lingerie of sheer lace, dresses that required a confidence I didn't know I possessed. "Why are you doing this?" I asked one night over a dinner of Wagyu beef and red wine. "You can have anyone, you could have a supermodel. Why kidnap a student from California?" Chul-Moo set his glass down. "Supermodels are easy. They want my money or my name. You look at me with fear, yes, but also with a fire that they don't have. You are the only person who has ever looked me in the eye and told me no." He stood up and walked around the table. Standing behind my chair, he leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. "I don't want your submission because you are afraid, Angela. I want it because you cannot help yourself." He slid his hand down my arm, his fingers tracing the veins in my wrist. My pulse was drumming a frantic rhythm. He felt it. He smiled against my skin. On a night when the rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, I had tried to find a way out through the service elevator, only to be caught by Chul-Moo himself. He didn't yell. His anger was worse. It was quiet and freezing. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the master suite, throwing me onto the expansive bed. "You think you can run from me?" he hissed, hovering over me. The tattoos on his arms seemed to writhe in the dim light. "I'm not a dog," I screamed, pushing at his chest. "I'm a human being. You can't just keep me here because you're obsessed." He pinned my wrists above my head with one hand. The sheer strength of him was terrifying, yet a traitorous heat was blooming in my stomach. He looked down at me, his eyes burning with a dark, hungry flame. "I am obsessed," he confessed, his voice a low growl. "I haven't slept since the night I saw you. I see your face every time I close my eyes. If I let you go, I will lose my mind. And I do not lose things, Angela." He lowered his head, his kiss more of a claim than a request. It was hard, demanding, and tasted of salt and desperation. To my horror, and my secret shame, I didn't pull away. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, as the line between victim and lover began to dissolve in the shadows of the room. The morning after was a blur of tangled silk and the heavy scent of his cologne. I lay in the center of his massive bed, my body aching in ways I had never felt before. Chul-Moo was already awake, standing by the window in a silk robe, a cigarette between his fingers. The physical intensity of the night had been a revelation. He was a man of extremes, possessive, demanding, yet strangely attentive to the way my body reacted to his touch. I should have felt disgusted by my own response, but instead, I felt a terrifying sense of belonging. "Eat," he said without turning around, gesturing to the breakfast Min-hee had left on the terrace. "We are leaving the city today. I have business in Busan and you are coming with me." "Business?" I asked, sitting up and pulling the sheet to my chest. "The kind you do not ask questions about," he replied. He turned, and for the first time I saw a fresh bruise along his ribs, a remnant of a struggle I hadn't been privy to. The reality hit me. He wasn't just a rich man with a dark hobby. He was a soldier in a war I couldn't see. Busan was a salt-sprayed contrast to the neon glow of Seoul. We stayed in a private villa perched on a cliffside, but the business took us to the shipping docks at 3 a.m. Chul-Moo kept me in the back of the SUV, the windows tinted so dark the world looked like a charcoal drawing. Outside, I watched through the glass as he stood before a row of men. The air was thick with the smell of fish and diesel. A man was brought forward, his face bloodied. I gasped, pressing my hand to the glass. Chul-Moo didn't flinch. He spoke a single sentence and one of his men handed him a heavy metal pipe. He didn't use it, not yet. But the way he held it with a casual, practiced ease told me everything I needed to know about the man I had let into my bed. He was a monster, a beautiful, tattooed monster who ruled through fear. When he returned to the car 10 minutes later, his knuckles were split. He didn't say a word. He simply reached over, took my hand in his and squeezed it until it almost hurt. Back at the villa, the adrenaline of the docks hadn't faded from his eyes. He stripped off his shirt, revealing the full map of his tattoos, dragons and tigers intertwined in a permanent war across his back and chest. "You saw," he stated, watching my reaction in the mirror. "I saw a man who enjoys hurting people," I whispered, though my heart was racing for all the wrong reasons. He walked over to me, his presence cold and electric. He took my face in both hands, his thumbs grazing my cheekbones. "I do what is necessary to keep what is mine. In this world, Angela, if you are not the hammer, you are the nail. I will never let anyone be the hammer to you." He kissed me then, a desperate, bruising kiss that tasted of iron and salt. In its rawest form, a frantic collision of his violence and my burgeoning need for his protection. I realized then that I was falling for a man who lived in the throat of death, and the more dangerous he became, the harder it was to breathe without him. The peace of our dark sanctuary was shattered by a single phone call. I was in the library, trying to lose myself in a book, when I heard Chul-Moo's voice rise in the hallway, a rare occurrence. He was speaking rapid, clipped Korean, his tone like a sharpening blade. Min-hee entered the room, her face paler than usual. "The American embassy," she whispered. My heart skipped. Shalom and the girls hadn't given up. They had gone beyond the local police. They had filed a missing persons report that had reached the federal level. Suddenly, I wasn't just a girl who had run off with a boyfriend. I was a potential kidnapping victim with a US passport. Chul-Moo walked in, his eyes like two dark voids. He held a tablet showing security footage of the hotel where my friends were staying. They were being escorted by men in suits, not his men but government officials. "They are making things difficult," Chul-Moo said, his voice dangerously calm. "They are looking for a girl who doesn't want to be found. Is that who you are, Angela, a girl who needs to be rescued?" I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't know the answer. "I can't hide you forever," Chul-Moo admitted that night. We were sitting on the balcony, the Seoul skyline shimmering like a bed of diamonds below us. "Not without a war, and a war with your country is bad for business." He reached into his pocket and pulled out my passport and a first-class ticket to Los Angeles. The departure was in 24 hours. "I am giving you the choice I never gave you at the club," he said, his voice thick with a restrained emotion that sounded like grief. "You go back to your life, you finish your school, you forget the man with the tattoos." "And if I stay?" I asked, my voice trembling. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "If you stay, you become a ghost. You will never see your family again. You will be the queen of a world that lives in the dark. I will love you until the day someone puts a bullet in my heart, but you will never be free. I looked at the ticket. It represented safety, my mother's hugs, and my friend's laughter. Then I looked at him, the man who had stolen me, broken me, and somehow made me feel more alive than I ever had in California. The airport was a blur of high-security checkpoints and silent goodbyes. Chul-Moo didn't come to the gate. He couldn't risk being seen by the officials who were now monitoring my departure. Min-hee walked me to the terminal. Before she left, she handed me a small, velvet box. He said you would know when to open it. As the plane leveled out over the Pacific, I opened the box. Inside was a heavy gold necklace with a pendant of a tiger, Chul-Moo's symbol. Attached was a note in his elegant, sharp handwriting. 2 months, Angela. That is how long I will give you to breathe. But remember, even across the ocean, you are mine. I leaned my head against the cold window and sobbed. I was going home, but I felt like I was leaving my soul behind in the neon-lit streets of Seoul. I was free, yet for the first time in my life I felt completely lost. Returning to California felt like stepping into a movie where the color had been drained out. My mother held me for an hour, crying into my hair, while Shalom and the girls threw a welcome home party that felt like a funeral to me. You're so quiet, Ang, Suri said, sipping a margarita by the pool. Did something happen over there? You haven't been the same since you met that guy. I'm just tired, Suri, I lied the same way I had lied for weeks. I tried to go back to my routine. I went to lectures, I worked out, and I sat in coffee shops. But every time a black sedan drove past, my heart stopped. Every time I smelled sandalwood or expensive tobacco, I found myself spinning around, searching for a tattooed hand or a predatory gaze. I was a ghost haunting my own life. I realized then that Chul-Moo hadn't just taken me, he had ruined me for a normal man. I wore the tiger pendant every day, hidden beneath my shirts. It felt heavy, like a physical link to the man thousands of miles away. I followed the news from Korea obsessively, searching for any mention of corporate restructuring or underworld crackdowns, code for Chul-Moo's wars. One night, exactly 6 weeks after my return, I saw a headline in an international business journal. Seoul power shift, Park syndicate expands overseas. My hands shook as I read the article. He was moving. He was clearing out his rivals, consolidating power with a ruthlessness that made the journalists sound terrified. I looked at the calendar. 2 months were almost up. 2 months, Angela, I whispered to the empty room, his voice echoing in my mind. That is how long I will give you to breathe. It was a Tuesday night, exactly 60 days since I had stepped off that plane. A typical California fog had rolled into the hills, blurring the streetlights. I had spent the evening trying to study, but the words on the page looked like nonsense. I walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water, passing my front door. I stopped. The deadbolt, which I always locked religiously, was turned. The door was slightly ajar. My first instinct was to run for the phone, but a strange, calm certainty washed over me. I didn't feel afraid. I felt a surge of electric heat that started in my chest and flooded my veins. I pushed the door open. The living room was dark, save for the moonlight filtering through the curtains. And there, sitting in my father's old leather armchair, was a silhouette I knew better than my own reflection. Chul-Moo looked out of place in my modest California home. He was dressed in a black turtleneck and a tailored overcoat, his tattooed hands resting casually on the armrests. He looked tired, but his eyes, those dark, piercing eyes, were as sharp as ever. Your security is pathetic, Jagi, he said, his voice a low, familiar rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. How did you get here? I whispered, leaning against the wall because my legs were beginning to fail me. I told you I do not lose things. He stood up, moving toward me with that slow, graceful prowl. He didn't stop until he was inches away, his heat radiating off him, chasing away the California chill. He reached out, his fingers hooking into the neckline of my shirt to pull the tiger pendant into view. You wore it. I couldn't take it off, I admitted, my voice breaking. He cupped my face, his thumb tracing the dark circles under my eyes. Neither could I tried to let the air of this place satisfy you, but you look like a flower that has been kept from the sun. Chul-Moo didn't move. He stood in my living room like a king claiming a lost province. I have spent 60 days watching you through lenses and reports, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. I watched you walk to class with a heavy heart. I watched you sit on your porch looking at the moon, knowing we were looking at the same one. I trembled under his touch. You should have stayed in Seoul, Chul-Moo. You're at risk here, if the authorities find you. He let out a short, dry laugh. I didn't build an empire to be afraid of a few boarders. I came because I am bored of being alone in a palace built for two. He reached into his overcoat and pulled out a small black box. He didn't get on one knee. He wasn't that kind of man. He held it out like a command. Inside was a diamond the size of a bird's egg, flanked by rubies the color of fresh blood. Marry me, Angela, come back to Seoul as my wife. Or, he leaned in, his eyes burning, I will buy this entire street. I will move my business to Los Angeles. I will burn this city down just to be the only thing you see when you wake up. The choice was an illusion. I had known the moment I saw his silhouette in the dark that I was never going to let him leave without me. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I touched the cold metal of the ring, then looked up into the face of the man who had stolen my life and replaced it with a fever dream. I'm not a princess, Chul-Moo, I whispered. I'm a girl from California who just wanted to buy some face cream. You are my queen, he growled, snapping the box shut and pulling me into him. The kiss that followed was a collision of 2 months of starvation. He lifted me easily, my long legs wrapping around his waist as he carried me toward the bedroom I had slept in since I was a child. Everything about the night was a contrast, his rough, tattooed skin against my soft sheets, his ruthless Mafia strength against my desperate surrender. In the heat of the moment, there was no more fear, only the realization that we were two halves of a dark, twisted whole. He marked my skin with his lips, a silent promise that I would never belong to the light again. The sunrise over the California hills was beautiful, but I wasn't there to see it. By dawn, a private jet was already taxiing on a hidden runway at a small municipal airport. I sat in the plush leather seat, the massive diamond weighted on my finger, watching the American coastline disappear beneath the clouds. Chul-Moo sat across from me, sipping black coffee and reading a briefing on his tablet as if we were merely going on a business trip. He looked up, sensing my gaze, and reached across the aisle to take my hand. His grip was firm, possessive, and permanent. Are you sad to leave? He asked. I looked at the ring, then at the man who had crossed an ocean to claim me. I thought of my friends, my school, and the quiet life I thought I wanted. Then I thought of the throne waiting for me in Seoul, and the fire that only burned when he was near. No, I said, leaning back into the luxury of his world. I'm just wondering which store in Myeongdong we're going to first. Chul-Moo smiled, a real, rare smile that reached his eyes. Whatever you want, Jagi, the whole city is yours.